while we're on the topic of Bitcoin, and you mentioned these relays, is a relay similar to a node? So for people that are familiar with Bitcoin, is that like a good way to look at it? Is a relay like a node?
So a Bitcoin node has state, right? Internal state, which is the current state of the blockchain. Um, and then you update that state with signed messages, which is your UTXOs. So, um, so a Nostr relay doesn't have any state, or it has state, but not that kind of state. Um, it doesn't need any. There's no consensus, right? So Bitcoin's state is there's a consensus over the current state of the network or the current state of the UTXO set, and Nostr doesn't have anything like that. Nostr has there's no agreement on what the current state is, and there's no agreement on what data exists or doesn't exist. It's purely up to the individual relay to decide like what messages to keep and what not to keep, and so like every relay can have different policies about that. So for right now, for example, there are now like paid relays coming up, um, where like they only keep messages if you pay them, um, and then other relays will only store messages if your identity has like an associated username with it, which is it's called a NIP5 identity. Um, so like that's like a it's like metadata about your public key that you can set. Yeah, so some relays will only store your messages if you've set some metadata about your public key to show that, like, because that's a little bit more difficult than just generating a public key. You actually need to like add some extra information in there. And then still there's another way, which is like you can associate your public key with a DNS domain name, which proves that you've done something on that domain name to put your public key in there. And so that's that's like a harder step, more difficult step again. So some relays will only store your message if you've done that. So there's all these different mechanisms by which relays will decide whether or not to store your message, and also whether or not to reply to a request to send your message back out again, right? So some relays will do like spam filtering before they'll send the messages out. Usually they're paid relays that do that. But yeah, so the relays themselves are like the sky's the limit of what you can do there with a relay. But essentially, all they're doing is receiving messages and then sending them back out again upon request. But yeah, the heuristics for deciding like what messages to store and what not to store, that's up to the relay. So there's no global state, and there's no like Twitter has a global Twitter feed, right, of all the messages. Nostr doesn't have that because every relay is different.
Okay. And that I think that's an interesting thing maybe to talk about. So you mentioned spam filtering. I had heard about these private relays, and one of the reasons for them is spam, right? And you just mentioned Twitter, and as we know, there's a problem on Twitter with spam and bots and things. In fact, there's a problem on the internet, right? It's a kind of a battle we have to fight constantly. And so one of the ways that private relays were explained to me is that they are useful because you incur a cost, just like in the same way Bitcoin has the proof of work system, which proof of work was originally intended to fight back against spam, email spam. And so in the same way, these private relays essentially are making you pay to use them because it's it's not cost effective for a bot. Then basically, like if you have to pay $10 a month, you can't really run any bot, so you can't spam. Or if you have to pay for, a very small amount. Let's say you have to pay, half a penny, half a cent for each message, right? That's fine when it's one message. But if you're using a bot to spam 10,000 messages a day, then you're going to, it's going to get pretty costly pretty quick. So that's one of the advantages. I think it's also like a fundamental shift. You have to kind of, like we're talking about public and private keys, and like, what's the way to view them? Is there something that's analogous in the world today? Something that people generally people would understand. And I think that's one of the concepts. This kind of concept of spam and like paid access or proof of work. I think people are maybe in some ways put off by it in the same way that they are with Bitcoin, like because people look at the existing examples like PayPal or Venmo or whatever, and they see that you can sort of transact for free. Essentially, it appears that way. Depending on whether you're a vendor or merchant or whatever, maybe you incur a cost, or there's like a if you're using Visa or whatever, they charge you for using that service. It's just a small percentage, but that's where they make a lot of money. But you kind of have to wrap your head around this because we're so used to this like freemium model, like that where basic, but it's not free because they're selling your data essentially and putting ads in front of your face and doing all sorts of weird things with you. They're benefiting from your data basically. Like Facebook are doing experiments, they're doing social experiments, they're doing social engineering. They just try things on people, whenever they please. Oh, let's just like screw with politics. Let's like change the way that people interact or the way, or like let's see if we can like alter people's emotions if we like change the it's not, I'm not necessarily it's all nefarious, but anyway, the point being that they own your data, they can do what they want with it, and then they use your data to do all sorts of things that you're unaware of. That's the point I'm trying to make. And so this other way of viewing things is essentially that you're paying for the service, and I think that might put some people off. If we're talking about like Bitcoin with the transaction cost, or if we're talking about a private relay, but I think that's the reason that might be people might be put off is because we're so used to this viewing things as if they're free, because it's not true that you're not paying. Like if we're talking about like actually giving Facebook money, you don't pay to use Facebook. But you do have to give up something of yours that is valuable. So in a sense, that's how to look at it. You are paying for it. And so, yeah, I think maybe that's just an important kind of concept to wrap your head around. You have to kind of understand that the existing system isn't free. And what you're paying for here is a service, essentially. Like if you're paying for a relay, it's because maybe they provide... maybe it's a faster relay, right? Maybe it's or they're filtering spam out for you. There could be a number of things, which I'm sure things that you would know better than I do.